What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking to you about bevel grinding, particularly chef's knives. I posted a video a while back mentioning that I have sort of updated how I grind my chef's knives, and I've had a few people reach out to me and say, can you maybe make a video about that? So this is my updated version, my bevel grinding in 2025. A few years back now, I posted a video on how I grind my bevels on my chef's knives. And so if you're a maker of any sort, you know that things are always changing. You're always trying to find a better way, a faster way, even a different way. And so my grinding sort of process has updated. So this is how I used to grind my knives. Like an idiot, I've already gone and made the changes where my process has changed. I shouldn't have done that. I should have just left it. But anyways, this is how I used to grind my knives. First, I would break the 90s, center my edge. Then I would put in the primary bevels. That's where my convexity would generally come in. Then distal taper. Then true up those bevels. Then put in the full distal taper and get everything going sort of front to back. And then the final convexity. The only thing I've changed is my step 2 and step 3. I've swapped those around. Right, so this is what it used to look like I mentioned. First I would break the 90s, put in this lower bevel, distal taper, level out the distal taper, and then sort of blend everything back in. But in this step, most of the time I'd be revisiting the second step to kind of refine that bevel, because that's where the food release comes in to play. So what I've done now is I've switched these two around because that makes the most sense. So first I'll do the distal taper and like the top half of the blade, and then I'll put in that bevel because now I have more control about where I want that food release to be. So I'll do this one. I'll run through it. You can tell that it's already got this lower bevel in. This is 5200. It has been heat treated and tempered already. The only reason it has a bit of this lower bevel already ground out is because it's a bit of a thicker stock knife. This is an 1/8 inch, and I've just taken out some meat so that when I go to grind it now, a lot of the work is already pretty much done. Not pretty much done, but I've taken out a lot of the bulk. Same old story here. I've got my center lines laid out. So I'm gonna go break the 90s and make sure everything is straight as it can get it. Okay, I've got that first part done. I have broke these 90s and straightened out my edge here, which can sort of move and wiggle during heat treat. Now all I'm gonna do is mark out where I want to bring this top grind up to, and when I'm doing that, I will sort of sneak it up to this, like this bevel here, this like the 90 that I just broke. I'll sneak that all the way up until there. And my edge right now is right around like 25, anywhere from 30 to 25 thousandths of an inch. Is that right? Am I saying that right? Right there is about 28 thousandths of an inch. I don't know if you can see that. So generally, that is what I like that to look like. Oh shit, my camera's gonna fall. I'll take my grinds right up to here. This is gonna look like, it's gonna look like this. The entire area up here is where I'm gonna be taking off material, and I will, at this point in time, I'm doing a full flat grind. So from the spine down, it's gonna go flat all the way to this bevel. All the way down. Okay, so a few things I want to say as I'm doing this grind. I've stopped, I'm like halfway right now, but I just wanted to point out a few things. I'm not grinding with the belt straight up and down like this. I like to grind on a bit more of an angle because it'll give me more surface contact with my belt, and I'm able to, I found I'm just able to control my grind a bit better with that. When I have it like this, I tend to like flop from side to side and dig the belt in. When it's like this, there's more surface area, and it just, I've found it to be easier. Second, what you'll notice is as I'm moving this grind up, my thumb, my pressure point on the back side, so like imagine this is the back side, the pressure point from where I'm pushing moves as the grind is moving, because that's where I want to remove material, right? The end goal obviously being that I want a grind that goes from spine to edge, but I don't want to take away too much material down near the edge, just because I've found that sometimes if I take too much material off the edge too early, when I go into the next steps to put in that bevel, that food release bevel, I've already taken away too much material and it's not going to perform how I've intended it to perform. A good indicator of that is those 90 degrees we put in, right? So that you can see that shining small edge. I want to, by the end of this stage, have my grind all the way up to this spot here that I've marked out, and I want to eliminate that edge, but I'll get pretty close to it early on. Like you'll see on this side, it's much smaller. That's about as close as I'll get. Now I'll go and do my distal taper grind, and then once the top end, once I've pretty much got my distal taper done where I want it to go, then I'll come back and put pressure down on the edge and just walk my grind all the way up to this line until this, you know, that 90-degree sort of bevel we put in has essentially disappeared. Those are a few things that are going through my head as I'm grinding, so sorry. I know this is a lot of talking, but Okay, here's where I'm at. I've got my distal tapers ground in. Let's see. You can kind of see it. Or actually, I think you can actually really see it. So, distal taper is good. The bulk of it is pretty much done. Just some refining to do. And by refining now, what I mean is the next step, which is sort of making sure that these bevels are flat, because I can almost guarantee that this is not leveled out. So at this point, I'm going to tilt my flat platen back on my grinder and kind of going like as if I'm sort of sharpening on a whetstone, except I'm doing this entire bevel. So it's kind of like what I said before, when I don't do my grind like this, I kind of grind it like this to cover more surface area. Now if I take that platen, you know, turn it even more, then I'm getting all that surface area, all that contact, and what that's going to do is it's really going to flatten out and true up those bevels. That's what I'm going to do now. You have to kind of make sure that your platen is nice and flat, and I know I say it so much, but this is why I have my disc grinder, because sometimes I'll have washouts on that flat platen, especially if you're always grinding a knife in one spot. You're going to wash out that platen. So a little thing that I do is, one side is my sort of beater side where I'll do anything on, but then the flip side of that, I always make sure that's nice and flat, and that's where I'll do all my flat finishing, all my flat grinds. And just to make sure, I'll sort of true it up on my disc sander, because the disc sander is as flat as it gets, at least for me. Excuse me, at least for me, because I don't have a surface grinder. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to true up those bevels, and then we'll go into the next thing. Yeah. Right, so I've got my tapered bevels, my distal taper all flattened out, nice and even on both sides. So at this point, my distal taper is pretty much done. It's at the final measurements, give or take, where I want it to be. The only thing that's going to be done after this is maybe some fine tuning when I blend in this part here, where the what is this called? At this spine area here, where there's still a little bit of meat and there's this, like, there's somewhat of a hard transition, so I still need to blend that in, but that can be done after. So the next step now is to essentially sharpen this knife. I'm gonna go and do it on my 2x72 like I did this. I'm just gonna keep it on the same angle, and as if I were on a whetstone, I'm gonna sharpen this edge at the same angle that I'm going to put a sharpened edge on when this knife is done. So this is gonna do two things for me. One, it's gonna straighten my cutting edge out, center it at like as best as it can get, because if I were to do this by eye, you know, like grind it center by eye, I can almost guarantee you I won't get it straight. So I'll do the bulk of the removing on my 2x72 because this is still quite thick, and then I'll move over to my disc and I'll use the disc same way as if it were a whetstone, and that'll get it nice and straight. So number one, it'll center my edge, and two, it'll give me a visual for how much material is still left on that edge. So when I'm grinding in my bevel, this thick black line here down on the edge, let's say that's where the sharpened bevel ends up after I've done doing it on my disc sander and my belt grinder. So let's say that's where that ends up. And let's say this line here is where I want my convex grind to be. So that's how high I'm gonna grind this next portion up. This dark black line here, this sharpened bevel, gives me a visual of how much material I can remove until I get down to a zero edge. So that's gonna help me make this knife as thin behind the edge as I'm comfortable getting it, and in the end gives the end user a knife with less resistance behind the edge, better cutting action, smoother cutting action, all that good stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. Now I'll show you how I do that. I got my edge all the way down to 0 now. So it's been sharpened, and then I just took the sharpened edge off so I don't cut myself. So you can see that edge that runs all the way along, how thick it is. So that's gonna be a really great visual aid for my next step here, which is, well, it used to be number 2, but now number 3, grinding that primary bevel. So this is why I've switched up my grinding process, because now I have my taper done. Everything up here is done. Those are the measurements that I want. Now I can go and put in the bottom grind, which is going to control my food release essentially, and add convexity to the blade, which is what you want for a kitchen knife. So I'm just going to mark out where I want this grind to be. That's kind of what my grind will look like a little bit. I might start it a bit lower. If I go too high, then it's, you know, too high. It's a matter of now I gotta grind it back down. But if I start lower, I can always pull it back up. Now I can see as I'm grinding how much material is left behind that edge and how close I can get to a 0 edge. Really helpful. Because I like my knives to be quite thin behind the edge, because it makes for like a really nice cutting clean cutting, almost effortless knife. And that is what I want. That's what I'm looking for. So yeah, I guess it's back to the grinder for me. Kind of rushed it there, so it's a bit, still needs to be cleaned up a little bit. But yeah, I took it to my disc sander to just even everything out, and you can see that edge that was there before is essentially gone. So I've walked my grind all the way up to that edge. So the next step now is I'm just going to blend my top taper here into the rest of the distal taper. So this area up here that I haven't touched yet, these are still flat. And then we will do the final convex, which will will smooth everything out and bring in my final geometry. And then that's it. So that part there obviously doesn't take very long. I'm just blending these really and finishing up my distal taper. So, I mean, hopefully my camera's picking that up, but that's what that looks like. Nice distal taper all the way out to the thin tip. And off camera I put in my plunge lines So nothing crazy going on. Now we're on to the final step here, which is convex everything. And this is going to be done on my rotary platen. If you don't have a rotary platen, you can always just use a use slack belt. You just have to be a little bit more gentle. You can't really press into it as much as you can with a rotary platen. That's where that tool comes in real nice. So that is all that's left, and then it's on to hand sanding. Alright, and that's it. That is how I grind my chef's knives, my new updated version. And so now this thing is ready to go. It's ready to be hand sanded. The last thing I'm going to do now before hand sanding is just hit it on my disc sander with the leather backing. That smooths everything out, and I can bring it up to 400 grit and start my hand sanding there, which is really nice. But other than that, this thing's good to go. Nice and thin behind the edge. I have edge flex. So this thing should be a really, really good cutter. That's all I've got, guys. If you have any questions, leave them down below and I will do my best to answer them. Other than that, hopefully this helped. I'll see you later. Peace.